The purpose of my article is to challenge the dominant scholarly view on the nature of the EU's external anti-crime cooperation in its eastern neighborhood. In the literature, a view prevails that international cooperation of the EU's specialized police agencies Europol and European Police Training College, or CEPOL, is functionally driven or responds to the threat of organized crime. Thus, given the Western Balkans' position on the crossroads of major criminal flows and its dire socio-political situation after the wars in ex-Yugoslavia, many scholars claim that organized crime was main trigger of the Euro-Balkan cooperation on internal security in the 2000s. Yet, a detailed examination of the dynamics of the EU's police cooperation in the Western Balkan region against the contrasting dynamics of organized crime reveals that Euro-Balkan police initiatives in this decade were politically driven par excellence. I studied reports on organized crime of several influential bodies, including the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, and interviewed former Europol's directors and other police practitioners to show that the respective findings have not been integrated sufficiently enough into the literature. I then juxtaposed the dynamics of organized crime to the actual dynamics of police cooperation in the context of evolution of the political relations between the EU and the Western Balkans in the 2000s. To show that the main forms of organized crime that are typically associated with the Western Balkan countries, trafficking in drugs, trafficking in human beings, and small arms and light weapons, displayed downward dynamics in the region in the 2000s. These reduction trends were due to the general improvement of the regional security situation after main conflicts, the gradual political stabilization of the region, and changes in international environment. For example, as concerns the main problem of heroin trade in the 2000s, the Balkan corridor for heroin traffic was no longer as active as it used to be previously. In the 1990s, ethnic Albanian smugglers controlled up to a 70% share of the heroin trade in key destination markets in Europe. By contrast, in the 2000s, the indigenous Balkan nationalities made up a minority of arrestees in Europe. A decline in the production of other important drug types, such as cannabis, also occurred. The Western Balkan-linked human traffic also declined in Europe in the 2000s, which was due to a reorientation of major drug and human traffic flows to the eastern part of the Balkan Peninsula, Romania and Bulgaria, and numerous initiatives targeting the root causes of crime that were undertaken jointly by the Balkan authorities and international actors. Also, as a result of the diminished domestic production of arms, market saturation, and major weapon collection programs, the Balkan-linked arms trade became one of least visible organized crime forms in the EU in the 2000s. Given these downward criminal trends, it would be natural to expect the EU to have limited interest in the Balkan organized crime problem in that decade. However, the number of Euro-Balkan anti-crime initiatives saw a continuous increase, especially in the post-2005 period. After Kosovo crisis, the EU realized that eradication of the underlying roots of conflict would be impossible without a proactive conflict prevention and integration strategy towards the Balkan region. This led to the growing securitization of the region as a gangster's paradise and the launch of the two new institutional frameworks for the Union's relations with the Western Balkans: the Stability Pact, a basic post-Kosovo war stabilization and conflict prevention tool, and the Stabilization and Association Process, a comprehensive framework for the Balkans' step-by-step transformation and its integration into the European mainstream. Officially, police cooperation acquired an important status in both strategies. The first steps to launch police cooperation was made by the EU through the Stability Pact. The pact patronized a number of projects, all of them combined functional internal security objectives with wider political goals of creating a regional security partnership among the Balkan Pact's participants to prevent future war. However, the number of practical police projects was limited due to the EU's initial uncertainty in the future of the region and its enlargement fatigue. post-2004. Until mid-2000s, the EU was still preoccupied with resolving the remaining constitutional problems of Yugoslavia's disintegration, compliance with obligations stemming from the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, and with the preparations for the Big Bang enlargement. As a result, until the mid-2000s, quite little practical police cooperation was conducted between the EU and the Western Balkans. It's only after a more serious political shift in the EU's position from stabilization towards integration in the late 2004 that practical police cooperation gathered full pace, mainly under the aegis of the stabilization and association process. The completion of the Big Bang enlargement project, the enhancement of the conditionality regime through the so-called sectoral conditionality, intermediate short-term rewards such as liberalization of the visa regime that the Union proposed to the Western Balkan countries in exchange for their progress in police cooperation, all contributed to a radical intensification of Euro-Balkan law enforcement. Again, this increase in police cooperation dynamics ran contrary to the decline of organized crime trends. Practically, the intensification of Euro-Balkan law enforcement is evident in the growing degree of criminal intelligence and data exchange, operational cross-border investigation and training exercises. For example, Europol adopted its second enlargement strategy in which Balkan countries were designated a major target for its international cooperation and assistance. The contractual agreements were signed with the Western Balkan countries, leading to strengthened contacts with Europol. The Balkan liaison officers were placed in Europol's premises in The Hague, and Europol issued its first comprehensive risk assessment report on the Balkan organized crime and intensified contacts with the SELEC Center. Police Cooperation Convention for Southeast Europe became the first multilateral agreement concluding between the Western Balkan countries on sensitive internal security matters. And cooperation between the respective countries and CIPOL also intensified. To summarize, in the 2000s, Balkan-related organized crime exhibited continuous downward dynamics in Europe. Despite this, joint Euro-Balkan police cooperation intensified in that decade. As criminal dynamics did not coincide temporarily with the dynamics of Euro-Balkan law enforcement, the functional factor cannot be held directly accountable for the police ventures. Instead, major inducement for the externalization of the EU's police cooperation in the Western Balkans in the 2000s came from an overarching power political factor linked to the EU's growing interest in enhancing its strategic presence in its Balkan neighborhood.